You are now listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. Hope your preparation is going well. This is a special episode about the speaking component of the exam. We've got Dominic Cole. He shares a bit on how to improve your core skills. Then we focus on the speaking. We really dissect the exam, what to expect, what to do, the best approach to take. He shares a technique that I have been using with my students with great success on where you can learn how to respond always with the correct tense and with the correct vocabulary. Also, I'd just like to remind you that there are the IELTS learning guides available at IELTSPodcast.com. Have a look at those, especially if you're having challenges with your writing. There's some really detailed explanations in the learning guides. If you're having problems with your speaking and you need more core skills, you need to work on your core skills, go to IELTSPodcast.com and look at the Speaking Fluently videos. I think they're up there on the top right, and those will be able to give you a lot of valuable advice from a podcast we did with Robbie. Listen to everything and tell me what you think about it as well. And send me an email if you've got any challenge. Could you give any advice of how to improve the core language skills?
Okay, if we sort of take each paper in turn, one with the writing, I would simply not bother writing complete essays, certainly not the whole time. The way to write an essay is not necessarily to write essays. The way to write an essay is to learn how the separate parts of the essays work. Or put another way, you can't write an essay until you can write a paragraph. And so there, for instance, it may not work for everybody, but if you have a problem with coherence or even actually task response, start with writing paragraphs. And in a way, this is a very friendly suggestion because it's easier to write a paragraph. You can write more paragraphs. One problem with writing essays is it takes quite a long time. 40 minutes, if you're studying by yourself, is quite a long time to sit down and write an essay. If you, in contrast, just write paragraphs and make it a 10-15 minute exercise, you may very well find you produce better English. And it's not always about quantity, it's about quality as well. So I would start with just producing quality paragraphs. That would be the writing. The listening and the reading, the people who read best are the people who read most. I mean, so simple suggestion there is go and read. And adding another point is read things which are interesting to you. Because if you're reading things which are interesting to you, your brain starts working and you start learning. Whereas if you read something which you think you should read, but is in fact quite boring, your brain goes to sleep and you may well be wasting your time. And the benefit of both reading and listening is this is where you really learn vocabulary. And vocabulary is a huge part of IELTS, and all language actually. So that's the writing, maybe paragraphs, reading, listening, listen to the podcast, go read a newspaper. I like newspapers. Newspapers should have something in them for everybody. And actually newspapers cover the sort of topics you're likely to find in IELTS. And speaking for many people is a hard one because many people don't have someone to talk to. But on the speaking, ideally you just want to find someone to talk to and practice your conversational English. The speaking exam is really just a conversation. And if you can't do that, you can always practice recording yourself. The one thing I don't really suggest you doing is going away and sort of practicing or doing lots of practice questions. You want to do a few to find out how they work.
Yeah.
But I think it can be dangerous actually if you do too many practice questions. Because you start to give automatic responses. And as someone who's done a lot of examining, not for IELTS, but for similar exams, Examiners aren't really impressed by automatic responses. The type of response which impresses the examiner is almost always the natural response, the response in answer to the question they've just been asked.
Yes.
And a really, really intelligent comment, I thought, which someone sent in to me was, almost the worst thing which can happen to you is that you've got a question, or you get a question which is similar to a question you've had before. Because you start to answer the wrong question. You start to answer the question you had before. And both in speaking and writing, that tends to be quite a serious problem.
Yeah. So for the speaking, what you'd say is just try and get as much sort of like natural speaking as possible.
I would say so, yes. I would say so. The one strange part about speaking is the part 2, long-term speaking, where you have to speak for 2 minutes. So you need to train yourself to speak for 2 minutes. But that one is really just telling a story, or talking about one of your personal experiences. It's not really a presentation or anything like that. The question is almost invariably, talk about a pair of shoes you have bought. The key word there is you. And then say where you bought them, why you bought them, when you bought them, and why you like them.
Yeah.
The point is, you're talking about yourself. And one thing you can do is just practice talking about your own personal experiences. Look through your photo album. Practice describing a picture. And actually that's quite a good tip, because if you see a picture, you start to have more things to talk about. You can see precisely what you want to say. So for part 2, that would be one suggestion.
Wow, that's a good tip. Sort of like visualize any object or visualize the question, and then from there start your monologue, so to speak. Start to your 2 minute long talk.
To interrupt you slightly, one thing I've tried in class, and I forget where I first found this, but it does work, is in your 1 minute preparation time, it may sound a sort of crazy idea. One thought is simply to close your eyes and try and see a picture, to visualize. And the idea is if you close your eyes, you start to visualize much better. And if you see a picture, you see things. And things give you precise vocabulary. And the best vocabulary, and actually in all parts of IELTS, is precise vocabulary. Not long words, not complex words, the right word. So if you're talking about a garden, say a plant or a shrub, for example, or the lawn,